They did not think of something as existing in material terms. For them, something existed when it had a function in an ordered system. Then it exists. We know this because, again, what we find in the literature. The Egyptians very easily talk about the non-existent. You say, okay, well, what's the non-existent for the Egyptians? It's things like the desert and the cosmic oceans, the ocean, the Mediterranean. Those are the areas of the non-existent. Clearly, this is not a material category. This is a functional category. It was not functioning in their world. Now, again, even when we think of the word functioning, we have an inclination to misunderstand it if we bring our own worldview to that. We think of something functioning in scientific terms. That wasn't their criteria. For them, something functioning had to do with humanity. It works for us. It functions for us. If it didn't function with regard to people, we're not talking about ecology here. If it's not functioning with regard to people on a practical level, it didn't exist. Now, again, that's not because they're stupid about these things. It's just that that's what was important in their world, for something to fit into an ordered system. And that's the most important criteria, the most distinguishing character. So if we could say it this way, in our world, the line between existence and non-existence is a material line. And you cross over from one to the other based on a material process. In the ancient world, the line between non-existence and existence was a functional line. That's what brought something from one category into the other. Now, it's precisely that crossing from one category into another that we're talking about when we talk about creation. Creation is to cause something to exist. Great. Both us and the ancient world agree on that. Creation is to cause something to exist. But you hear the zinger coming now. If existence means something different, that makes the act of creation something different. Because to cause something to exist materially is a very different activity than to cause something to exist functionally. If you've got a different ontology, you're going to have a different view of creation. Now, we would never dream of approaching the text with that idea in mind. It is not our world. It's not our way of thinking. We don't even imagine that there's another way to think about ontology besides a material way. This is not a question we even asked. Who would think that you could have a different idea of what existence meant? We wouldn't think of it on our own. It's only trying to read the text with ancient eyes through the worldview of the ancient Near East that we would come to those conclusions. Now, you might think here that I'm just taking something from Mesopotamian Egypt and slapping it down on the Bible and saying this is so. I don't know if it'll be good news for you or not for me to tell you that that's not how I came to this. I came to this understanding of ontology and this view of creation from reading the Bible. And only after I saw it in the Bible did I say, oh, wait a minute. I've been reading these ancient Near Eastern texts for 30 years and never noticed that that's what's there, too. I'm going to take you through some of that process as we move along here. First of all, I can't help throwing in a Dilbert. Of course, Dilbert and the boss, every project you've worked on got canceled. It's as if you didn't even exist. They're talking about ontology here. He says that's not entirely true. I occupied space. I'd like to see someone who doesn't exist do that. Well, the boss says a dead person can occupy space. But a dead person exists. Okay, now notice what's going on here. Okay, we have a functional negation. You didn't function. Everything got canceled. Okay, we have a functional ontology. So you don't exist because you did not function. He argues a material ontology. But I occupied space. Okay? The logical superiority of a functional ontology over a material one. As Dilbert himself acknowledges, I won the argument, but it was a hollow victory. Okay? And look at how we would agree with that. Yes, a dead person, a corpse. Does the person exist? No. Interesting. Even we think functionally more often than we realize. Okay, after a little interlude there with Dilbert, let's start talking about what we find in the biblical text. Obviously, the word created is key here. The Hebrew verb bara, used in Genesis 1:1. So in the beginning, God created, bara, the heavens and earth. Now we have a new question to ask. What does this mean? Created in what way? Now you can see that at this point it doesn't become helpful to say, well, I would like to interpret the text literally. It says created and it means created. You can see that that doesn't solve a thing. Okay, what ontology are we dealing with here? What do they mean by creation? What's that line of existence and non-existence that's being crossed? That's a question we haven't been asking. But if we want to interpret the text literally, we better find out what they mean by this word, not what we think creation means. That's not literal. Right? What's literal is what they meant by the word. So how do we figure out what they meant by the word? Okay, Moses is not available for interviews this month. He's busy on the Oprah show. No. Okay, so what are we going to do with this? How do we figure out what they meant? Well, this is standard linguistic procedure. There are ways to do this. Okay, this is why people get paid the big bucks in academia. Okay, because there are ways to do this. We figure out what words mean by watching how they're used. You say, is that all there is to the big bucks? Because that's what you do every day. You figure out what in the world your kids are talking about by the context they're used in. But words have context, and that's how you figure out what they mean. So all we have to do is look around on this word. It's about 50 times. 50 times that it occurs. Okay, let's start looking at them. You could pull out a concordance. You could find them. You could look at these passages. Okay, you don't have to be a linguist. It only takes God as its subject. Everybody says that. Everybody knows that. God's the only subject that's used of this verb. So it's a divine activity. Great. Haven't learned anything new there. Interesting little piece of information. Oh, but now, if we're going to figure out what this creation activity is, let's take a look at some of the outcomes. What are the objects of the verb? What are the kinds of things that the text would say God barad? Because that's going to tell us what kind of activity it is, right? Shake your head, yes. Good. Okay. So we start taking a look at them. Well, here's a listing of them. People groups. The nations. Jerusalem. It doesn't make God really the general contractor. Phenomena, wind, fire, cloud, destruction, calamity, darkness. These are the things that God baras. Abstractions, purity. Create in me a pure heart, O God. Are we talking about something material here? Even when it seems that it could possibly be something material, it jumps up and surprises you. People, oh, people, that's material. Male and female. Oops, that's functional. We find at every turn, the Bible uses the word bara to deal with functions, establishing how things work, where they fit into the ordered cosmos. We find then that this word does mean create. I'm not suggesting a change, but it's creation in a different way than what we tend to think about it. It's creation of functions. This begins to suggest to us then that in Genesis 1, we do not have an account of material origins. Instead, we have an account of functional origins. Let's move on. So it starts how? Now the earth was formless and empty. Formless, that sounds material. Now if you translate it that way that it does, as usual, we have to look at how this word is used. And again, we find that it typically refers to things that are not functioning. Things without function. The starting point is not lacking matter. Notice we have the waters, verse 2. Okay? The waters and the darkness was over the face of the deep. It's not lacking matter here. If this were an account of material origins, we would expect it to start without material.